Hello, I am Dr. Corinne Weaver, and I got a story to share with you guys today. It's actually about my daughter and how she struggled with, I guess it was a learning disability. We didn't catch it till she was 2 or 3, and we thought it was kind of funny when she was speaking, and she would say, instead of shoe, she'd say like sha, or have issues with her speech. And for the longest time, I thought it was just a speech issue. So we put her through a, speech therapist, and she went through speech therapy. And when you have speech issues, what you kind of find out, if you can't communicate well, you tend to have anger issues along with that. So having a 2 or 3 year old child that was continuously to be angry was not fun as a parent. And me doing upper cervical work, of course, I did chiropractic with her, but I knew there was something else that she needed. And so we started doing something called neurofeedback, which I think we might share with you guys today. And the neurofeedback actually helped train her brain to see, kind of enlighten her brain to see words more clearly. And so with her development, this was around when she was 6 or 7, and she started telling me, "Hey, Mom, I can see words now." And so when she could see words and words became more clearer, that's when her brain started opening up and she wasn't as angry. But when you're dealing with a child that's so angry, it can be a very scary moment. And I know that you guys have dealt with that as well. And I have many, many patients that have children that have speech issues. And so, having a child of your own and seeing it and doing things that you can to help them, it just gives you relief. So I'm really very thankful for how I was able to help her with neurofeedback. And now that she's in middle school, 15-year-old middle school, she's doing fantastic. And we just had conversations today, and she's like, "Mom, I'm just doing so much better than what I was." And I said, "I know, praise God for that."
So hello, this is Gina and Don with Focused Healthy Family. This is podcast number 15. Today we are talking with Dr. Corinne Weaver with Upper Cervical Wellness Center. But before we get to that conversation, let's hear a word from our sponsor. Today's podcast is sponsored by Q Sciences. Don and I discovered that the supplements we were taking and giving to our children were not being absorbed properly. I was very excited when I found Q Sciences. I was impressed with the quality of the products and that they provide maximum absorption. They have a variety of products, including a Q Max product, which is a combination of 3 products, including vitamins, minerals, and a probiotic. They also have hemp oil, a vitamin B12 spray, a sleep spray, and kids products. I've really seen a difference in how these products are improving how I feel, improving my mental health, and I'm happy with the quality of these products and how they're helping our whole family. If you'd like to learn more,
simply go to qsciences.focusedhealthyfamily.com. That's the letter Q, sciences.focusedhealthyfamily.com. Or you can find a link on the front page of the focusedhealthyfamily.com website.
And stop throwing your money away on supplements that don't work and use a quality product like Q Sciences.
And we're back. And today's podcast, we're talking again with Dr. Weaver. Dr. Weaver has a successful private chiropractic practice. She has had that for over 15 years. She is an international best-selling author of 2 books. She's an accomplished speaker. She does have a podcast, which she calls No More Meds. So welcome, Dr. Weaver. We're excited to have you here on the show.
Well, now it's been 18 years. I don't even know how the 3 years went by. So I've been doing this work for 18 years. It's kind of hard to believe that.
Well, in fact, tell us a little bit more about your practice, because we want to find out, because I know, you do chiropractic, but you do a lot more than just that.
Right. Well, the thing is, chiropractic is all about your body healing. It's the philosophy, right? I got into chiropractic work, well, one for myself. I was a very, very sick kid. And I had a really bad bike accident when I was 10 years old and busted out my teeth. And from that day, I couldn't breathe. And I lived on inhalers and breathing machines morning and night. And I just thought that was the way I was supposed to live. And years down the road, my uncle was into natural healing, and he would bring in herbs for me. And I was laughing with a patient the other day how I was talking to her about Avocados, which is cat's claw. And she's like, what? And so you probably have heard of maybe Mary Ruth's herbs, but she has some really cool herbs. And she had this Unadagato that tastes pretty good. And the little kid was like, this tastes good. I'm glad. And I said, well, my uncle used to bring it from the Amazon, and he would take these barks and roots and make it in the kitchen. And I'm here breathing it in. I'm like, it wouldn't taste as good as Mary Ruth's blend. But anyway, that helped me like look at plants as possibly healing, as this machine that I was on, that was a steroid that I was constantly doing, these medications. And even as a small kid, I was like 10, 11, 12, I was thinking, I don't want to be on these medications. They just didn't make me feel good. So John opened up my eyes to kind of plant healing. And then he introduced me to a chiropractor, and I was like, this is really cool. And then I felt led by God to become a chiropractor, because the philosophy alone was like, my body can heal. And I just had that empowerment that I wanted to do everything I could to help myself. And so I didn't realize chiropractic was for back pain. I kind of went into chiropractic thinking I just wanted to help me breathe, which is kind of funny. You go into chiropractic, usually have a back pain story. And for me, it was the asthma. And so that first, a good friend of mine sent me to an upper cervical doctor. And a lot of people don't know what upper cervical is. So cervical means neck. And so upper is the first the first bone, but we actually work on maybe the occiput, which is the skull, the first bone, and even the second bone. So we really focus on basically getting your head on straight, Don.
Oh, that's a tough job. That's a real tough job. Gina will tell you that.
Yeah, this might be a little tough. So once I got my head on straight, so I look back at my story and I was like, wow, I really messed my head up from having that bad, it was probably a concussion, because I didn't really know what concussion was in the 80s, right? But I fell right on my head, and that just kind of threw my whole I was just so imbalanced. And that's what threw my vagus nerve, which that nerve, Vegas, not Las Vegas, but there's a nerve that goes to your digestive system. It goes to your breathing. And so that nerve obviously got messed up somehow. And for me, it just affected me to have asthma and allergies. Some people, it could have had, a different perspective on how their health was, right? So getting that adjustment, I could breathe for the first time. And so he adjusted me, this upper cervical technique. It was just the most powerful adjustment that I've ever experienced. And I'm sitting there and he makes you lay down, and that's what we do in our practice. So after you get adjusted, we have patients lay down and rest, because we live on a crazy busy world and we don't take the time to rest, which is part of the healing process. And so I was able to rest, and I laid there for an hour. I didn't want to get up, because I was just like, I could take a deep breath. It was just like the neatest experience, because from age 10 to age 21, I wasn't able to take a deep breath using my diaphragm at all. Like in middle school and high school, I couldn't play any sports. I was always sitting on the sidelines, because if I walk a little bit, I need my inhaler. I mean, that's just how I lived. And I thought that was how I was going to live. And within a year of chiropractic, specifically upper cervical work, I threw away all my medication, and I've never gone back.
Well, it sounds like your business is ahead of the times.
Right.
Well, actually, though, what I found interesting, what you said, is that I think you gave a whole new picture of chiropractic, because I think most people think about it as backcracking, as that working on the spine only. But you're talking about really being a functional, really looking at the whole person, which is, I think, very different from what people think about chiropractic. And I think it's neat.
And breathing, I mean, obviously now with a lot of things going on with COVID, and breathing is very important to have better posture. I mean, one of the things too, as I was realizing how breathing can affect us. When that alignment is set between the brain and that first upper cervical spine, there's a big impact in the respiratory of your health. So, if you want to have proper breathing, you have to have a better alignment of your spine. And there's been many research that shows that the more the head leans forward, it does cut off 30 to 40. Everybody's like, yeah. Sit up straight.
We're fixing our posture.
Yeah. So like 30 to 40% of lung capacity goes down just by posture alone. That's pretty huge, right? So you can work on someone's posture and they can have better breathing, which means maybe better oxygen to the cells, which means better health probably throughout your whole entire body, just as simple as getting oxygen to every cell.
That makes a lot of sense. As an occupational therapist working in geriatrics, I see a lot of people with, very poor posture, and most of them do have breathing issues. It is a very big thing.
Yeah. So at first I was like, okay, how does chiropractic help asthma? But then, after 8 years of school, right? It's like, okay, how much school do we have to go to? And you never end, right? It's tons of learning. And, but it's just great to learn that not just the anatomy, but physiology of the body, that there is an important role in that nervous system. And, some chiropractors, I feel like we've definitely have taken a step forward, like you said, Don. But when I first started practice 18 years ago, people looked into chiropractic as not so great, like, oh, you're going to hurt me. And there's still that going on. I'm sure, you're not a real doctor, gotten this over the years. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, okay, why did I spend how much money to go to 8 years of school and that you have no respect for our profession? But we have grown as a profession. And, now that health and wellness is really growing and people are seeing what we call functional medicine, like you said, that functional side, chiropractors should be standing in that because we do know the anatomy and physiology so well, the nervous system, which is a key component of healing.
Yeah. Well, I had a thought and it went away.
Fix your posture.
I'm feeling very conscious right now of having to keep
your head on straight. I know, Doc, keep your head on straight.
It's too hard for me to see something though when I'm this far back. Well,
okay. You can do your wall angels later. We teach people how to do wall angels, and it's so cute when older patients, like you were saying, and they come in, and most of them, their posture is horrible, and they have arthritis, and they don't like to hear that word. I'm just like, okay, we call it art, right? We got a little bit of art in there because they don't like to say the word arthritis. They don't want to admit it. But I tell them, there's importance of movement. So the more that you sit and don't do anything, the joints actually get stiffer. So I try to encourage them to get out and walk and move. And we do things to try to help build up the core strength. And then there's something called wall angels, which I was mentioning just a minute ago, which anybody can do. It's like doing snow angels, but you're against the wall. So you get against the wall, and a lot of people can't get their elbows and their wrists touching the wall. I'm sure you guys have seen that. And that's, if I tell them, if you can't get that, then you can't breathe. You can't breathe properly. So you have to get your elbows and wrists touching the wall to go all the way up and down. And if you can do that, then you can open up your diaphragm and you can breathe properly. So we go over it a lot with patients.
Yeah, that's a great exercise.
Is that then, because you talk a lot about home-based therapies.
Mm-hmm.
So these are things that people can do on their own at home kind of thing? Is that what you mean by that?
Yeah, my home-based therapies, we do focus a lot on back and posture and just freedom of the neck. You probably won't be surprised, but they're pretty much, let's say I saw 100 patients yesterday. Every single one of them had tight, what we call SCM muscles and tight upper traps, like all the time. And they're like, how can I loosen this up? And I'm like, first of all, you're not breathing properly. They're like looking at me like, right. But if your diaphragm doesn't open properly, like if it's crushed all the time, then these are going to be tight. So when you use that belly breathing, it will relax your neck and shoulders easier. So, I talk about, it's not really necessarily so hard. It's just we're not trained properly on how to take care of ourselves. So, just simple things like you're talking about the home-based therapy is getting that posture right, working on the brain balance, because a lot of people don't have balance. And if you don't have balance, that means you don't have a good brain. Because they're like, what? And I'm like, yeah, balance comes from your brain. It actually comes from your pons. So that's the part of your brainstem. So if you're starting to see yourself not have good balance, then we got to work on your brain right now. We've got to strengthen your brain to help your balance.
So what other types of therapies do you have within that?
Well, sometimes I start with thinking about a baby, right? So
Right.
how does a baby get up and crawl? Like they have to work on their core strength before they can actually, how many times does a baby try to sit up? They try to sit up, they try to sit up, and they're working that core strength. And in order for them to walk, they have to have a good core. So you have to get back to those core kind of beginnings and think about what a baby kind of did to get, because a lot of times people aren't walking right. They just get up and start walking. So we just look at posture and we tell them certain exercises more specifically for them that they can kind of help themselves to release that neck and tension. But a lot of it's stress. I mean, we live in a very, very stressful world. And God created a lot of cool herbs or herbs, however you want to call them. And I've studied those because of my Uncle John, and I'm looking at a whole herb garden right now that I have growing on. But it's very important to use those things and to live in a more relaxed environment, because life is always going to be stressful. So there's certain things that I've used to kind of help me adapt into stressful environments that I've noticed that has helped with children. And even today, there's a big talk about the CBD and cannabis and stuff like that we've used that can be helpful for some and not for others. So you kind of have to look at, that perspective. But yeah, diet, nutrition, obviously drinking enough water. Home-based therapies. There's a lot, right? We go through a whole list. But I always say start with your posture, because if you can't breathe right, then just forget it all. Then you're not getting enough oxygen to your cells. The first thing I look at when we're doing blood work is to see if anybody's anemic. That's like a big red flag. So if you have anemia, get that fixed or figure out why you have anemia. That is a big component. Just recently, I just saw a patient and she found out she had cancer and she was having signs of anemia, but no one really kind of connected the dots. And I said, well, how long have you been having anemia? And probably for years. And then we realized she was losing blood, and she was losing blood in her colon, ended up being colon cancer. She did, able to get it removed, and she's doing great. And now that she had it removed, now she's like, okay, now I need to do things to start taking care of myself now. I'm like, yeah, that's usually how it happens, right? Find out something's bad with us. Now I got to take there, but doing everything you can now. But I do encourage people, if they're not getting blood work done, because a lot of people in the last couple of years, just with COVID and stuff, are scared to go to their doctor, or scared to get blood work done. Some of them don't want to know. Like I talked to a patient the other day, she's like, I don't want to know. And I'm like, well, I mean, you can find out you can be a little bit proactive. You can find out little keys that something's not working out to work on now, than versus full blown out, oh, now I have cancer throughout my whole body, because the body will give you a little warning signs if you actually listen.
Yeah, you got to learn to pay attention to those signs. And
yeah,
I've learned that lesson in a hard way.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
No, go ahead.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's, every day, that's a fun part of my job is people come in, they want a different perspective. Usually patients been to 3 or 4 other doctors, and they've been told this or that, and here's this medication for this, here's this medication for that. And really, they don't have a lot of time with the doctors. You usually have like 4 or 5 minutes. And I always tell a patient, your body better than any doctor, so I'm here to listen to everything so I can be the best education for you to help you kind of see these clues that may have been going on. If people have a little numbness or tingling here, or, not going to the bathroom regularly, just all these little symptoms that your body will tell you something's not right. And there's tests. There's a lot of tests these days that we can look at to figure out and pinpoint to find different causes.
So how do you work with families, right?
Yes, a lot of families.
How do you know, because one of the things that we do as in the work we do is we really want to work with the whole family versus, you know, just pinpointing one person out of it. Because we find that, like, that's like working with therapists. They're great, but they focus on the one person or the child. And we know that what affects one affects all of the ones in the family.
And the caregivers, the stress on the caregivers, if you have a child with special needs or particular issues, right? That's putting extra stress on the parent and obviously affecting their body and their own health issues that they might already have going on.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, just last night I was talking to a guy, and he has 3 kids, and one of his kids has severe OCD. And we discovered this probably last year. I think the family came to see me last year for him. And he, you know, not with just this OCD, but like they didn't really know he had that. And they thought he just was having, I wouldn't say just something on the spectrum. They just knew something was off. They didn't know exactly what it was or what the label was. And it's not all about the label, but just kind of understanding what's going on. And so when we did a brain map, I sat down. It was kind of interesting. I love doing brain maps. They're just so fun. I love the brain. I just love the brain. And so when I was looking at, and I didn't really know this kid that well, but I'm looking at the brain map, and what that is, you wear a shower cap and you put a bunch of, you know, electrodes on the head, and we're looking at different brain waves. And so I collect all this data, and then it comes into this cool, like 20-page report that I get like real excited about. I know it sounds silly, but that's just kind of what I do. And so then I sit down and I'm going over, like, I'm not even listening, like at first of what this family's going through. And I'm like, this kid's doing this, and this. And they're like, oh my gosh, how do you know from looking at that? And I'm like, there's patterns in the brain. There's different things that we can pick up in brain waves. And I can see what this kid has this pattern of. And they were like, they couldn't believe how we could see it based on just waves in the brain and how it is in behavior, like in real life, you know? And so we did some neurofeedback with him, and a huge change. He did really, really well. But I gave them, you're talking about the home-based therapies. This child really did need to see a plan. The family, and it's nothing wrong with the parents at all, but they were just, you know, kind of like flying. And she was a school teacher, and he worked at I don't know what type of job, but he was, you know, 8 to 5 kind of job. And so they didn't really have a big plan, like, okay, what are we doing for the weekend? Or when are we going on summer vacation? It wasn't like a plan. Like, this child needed a plan. So we talked about just certain systems to put in the house. And it was like a huge breakthrough for this child to see that. And his behavior did change. But we did that for a little while. And the reason I bring this up is because I haven't seen the child in a while. And so the dad came in crying like last night, and he felt bad. And I was like, what's going on? Why haven't I seen you guys since Christmas? Well, they had COVID and they had a stomach bug. And apparently a lot of people were getting sick between December, January, February. I don't know if you heard about all that stuff going around. And anyway, getting back under care, and he was crying. And he said that the last 2 weeks with his son has been really bad. And his son really acted out, and he really just wanted to put, you know, a basketball goal or something like that on. But the dad was like trying to explain to him, you can't do that because, you know, there's glass right there, and we can't put a basketball on this door because there's glass. And anyway, he went crazy. The child went crazy, couldn't have it up there, and he didn't know how to handle it. So and parents have probably done this, right? Where we're thinking, we'll just take away everything, and then the child the child will behave, and the child will do what they're designed to do if I take away everything. So he went up to his room and took away all of his toys.
Oh my.
And hit him in the garage or whatever, and he's crying because he's like, I don't think that was the right thing to do. I don't know what to do. But anyway, this family's coming to your class soon. So it was like a huge blessing, because I was like, when I was talking to him, I was like, not only do you need what we do here in this office, but you need mechanisms where I can't teach you. There's different mechanisms that the parents need to sit down and have a group setting like you guys offer, which I can't do. We can't do everything. We all have our little parts, right? But this family needs that. And I'm sure you hear that a lot with other families, but I just thought that was another story.
Yeah. I appreciate you referring. We're speaking at your practice. By the time this airs, I think we'll already have.
Yeah, it'll be unfortunately passed.
But yeah, because there are so many components, right? And that's why we do this podcast and why we interview people like yourself, because, all the resource searching that we went finding for our daughter with her severe OCD, just the time it took to find all these resources and gather all this help for her. That's why we want to bring people like you on our show to open people's minds up to new ideas, different practitioners who can be helpful, especially outside of traditional medicine, which doesn't always give us the answers.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times it's just they don't have I don't know if they have the resources or the time or whatever, but it's hard to find, someone that will spend an hour. Like me and him sat down, we had the time to sit down for 30 minutes and just chat about some things. Well, most people don't have that time, with a doctor that has professional help. And, I love what I do. And, be able just to help cases like that, and a sweet family. Of course, they're always sweet. The parents are always like super sweet. And then they have this child, right? And I was one of them, I was like, how can I have a child so defiant and mean and angry and then have, it's all because of the speech development and this part of her brain, which was in the temporals. It was in the temporals, which is on the side of the brain where we control memory and speech. And if it's not working properly, we get angry. And that's probably where, some of the concussions may come through. So if you have concussions, you get hit on the head, stuff like that, then they have that memory loss. You'll see that memory loss. And so, working on that temporal area of the brain now in children or even in adults or even later in life can help with not just memory, but the anger issues that I see.
Well, and it kind of goes to the point we talk about a lot is, that the behavior is really just a form of communication.
Something underlying the behavior.
That right? The fact that your daughter was angry wasn't so much about being angry, but it was about the fact that she was suffering and she was having troubles. And so if people can realize that, even like the gentleman with the OCD, I mean, we've had many nights of crying over OCD and all the.
And you don't know what to do as a parent, right? You're lost, and that's the typical response. You're not listening to me. I'm going to take this away from you, right? But that doesn't always get the desired outcome. But to understand there's something more going on. I love how you talk about the brain mapping, because it's just such a great tool, right? There's so much about the brain, but how often does that happen? I mean, how many people out there have had an EEG of their brain? Probably a very small percent.
And in fact, I would love, like, one of my goals, which I've had a lot of setbacks on, is to be able to do that in the school system. Because how much that would be helpful to have each child to kind of go through that and see their strengths and see their weaknesses, and have the teacher already know, hey, here's our strengths and weaknesses and how we can help each other, before even class starts. I mean, there's so many things that I feel like I could do, in that realm. And that was that's one of my desires and dreams, on my board, to be able to do that, at least starting with one school. And we were able to kind of do a little bit of a breakthrough before 2020, because my sister's a school teacher. And so we developed, this was in 2019, of course, it got all shut down. So we had 6 months to do it. But I want to get back in there and do it. We had a health and wellness club. And so the parents could sign off on having their children come and learn about nutrition and posture. And we were able to do some brain maps and go over some things in a school setting, which was amazing with the parents' consent. And so that was a really neat start to do that. And since my sister was ahead of it, she saw just a huge change in the children that signed up for the class. Of course, not every child signed up, but there was a good group of kids that were able to do that. And she was able to follow through them. She was doing second grade at that time. And the kids that showed up in that 6-month period, she was seeing changes that were very positive. And so we made a little strike there, but there's so much more that we need to do because, with everything with depression and anxiety, that is a big thing right now with our children. And anxiety is huge and depression's huge. And there's definitely things that teachers can learn, which I know they do their best with learning. But sometimes, my sister said it's been the hardest year. It has been the hardest year for her in school. And I think she's been a teacher for maybe 12 years. But this last year, because of not having enough staff, has anybody had that problem? No. Yeah, we have a lack of staff, but with the lack of staff and because of that, she's had multiple children in her class with disabilities. Mm-hmm. So she'll have like major outbursts every day with 3 or 4 children that will throw her whole dynamics of the classroom off. Mm-hmm. And she's like, I can't get hardly anything done when that happens. And that's, and it's sad because there is things that we can do as professionals. I would love to come into that classroom and be able to help, but there's limitations, government laws and blah, 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 but that's where we kind of need to stand as more doctors like us that we can help in that setting.
Yeah, that's so great that you were able to go into, especially an elementary classroom, to teach young kids these skills because they're probably excited to learn them and to take those things with them throughout life, that they've learned about posture when they were 8 or 10 and basic nutrition and things.
Yeah, we made some avocado smoothies and they were like, what is this? But then, some of them tasted it and some were like, I don't think so. And I taught them about different herbs and cacao and sugar. Yeah, because they don't get that. Of course, they're not going to get that in social media. Typically, when they're sitting there watching TikTok videos for 6 hours, they're not getting this information. So how can we get this to the younger generation? Because that's really where it needs to start now. Because they're not getting that information. I'll tell you that right now.
Well, one way might be to modernize and instead of maps, you do brain like Siri, our brain ways, because maps are like passe now. You don't use maps,
Yeah. Nobody knows what a map is anymore. Just ask Siri, right?
That's right.
Siri knows everything.
It'll be brain Siri from now on.
Right. What's my brain doing right now, Siri?
No, I did some work with EFT in classrooms and taught kids to use that for calming down and all, and we had a lot of fun doing that. I went in with another lady that actually is a principal of a school, and we were able to show kids, and kids had fun with it, and they actually helped them, so.
And that is fun, and like you said, you don't know. Gina was saying you don't know that day that you were there speaking to a child might have influenced talking to a parent, and making some lifestyle changes at the house, because it's expensive to buy avocados, by the way. Like my husband, he works at Costco, and he just told me, he's like, do you know how much avocados are now? And I was like, what, honey? And he was like, there was 10, I think it was 6 of them for $11. Wow. And I'm like, what is going on? Just like healthy eating is expensive. Yeah. And it's like, what's wrong with this? This should not be the case. Healthy eating should be a lot cheaper than fried macaroni and cheese, or whatever.
But in a way, if in thinking about it though, an avocado, eating an avocado fills you up better,
Mm-hmm.
you know, versus a bag of chips where you have to eat the whole bag to even get satisfied. So maybe it's kind of one of those things of the, do we do return on investment, ROI for food, you know,
Right, right.
but in a way,
Yeah.
I think we've kind of, because we've changed our diet just recently and kind of, we gave up sugars and we gave up a lot of the grains. And I don't get as hungry. We're eating much more fulfilled, like avocados and things like that. And so I'm not snacking as much, and, you know, it's fulfilling. So there may be that, if we look at that, maybe there's a formula we need to work out, but it might be less expensive in the long run, you know, to be able to eat
Well,
better
it
food.
is, but what's hard is in the chips, they put chemicals in those chips
Yeah.
that triggers the brain to want you to buy more and more and more and more. And you get in that habit, and until someone tells you this will literally cause you to have cancer, or unless you have cancer, it's typically like, oh, I don't need to change anything because everything's good. Unless something happens to you or a child is when I usually see, okay, now I'm ready to make the lifestyle change.
Yeah,
And it's unfortunate, but that's typically kind of what it is, you know, because they typically will not make, and that's what I see when we talk about families. When families come to see me, of course, it's not like, oh, I'm a perfect family and we're just coming in for, you know, a little bit of adjustments here and there. Usually it's like a disaster. It's like, oh gosh, this baby's having how many ear infections? This child has ADHD, you know, this, their dog's having vomiting issues. I mean, it's just like, okay, you know, like the list goes on, and I'm like, where do I start? But you know, some of these families, once they kind of step in and then they see what we can do, and oh, you mean I don't have to put tubes in my child's ears? I'm like, no, you don't need an antibiotic and antibiotic and antibiotic and then tubes. There's actually, if we make some lifestyle changes, we use my favorite, like essential oils. We do some light adjustment massaging. The body can heal, so we don't have to do these things. And once they kind of hear that, I mean, at first, the first time they hear it, they're like, you're crazy. But then it starts to really happen. And then that's when they start making those little steps, you know.
Right. When they see the difference that it makes.
Well, we could probably,
I just wanted to ask if people wanted to find out more about you. I know you're here locally in the greater Charlotte area. Where could they go to find out more about you?
Well, and do you virtually a lot with patients too?
Yeah, sometimes I'll do virtual or in person. So I'm a kind of in-person person. Does that make sense? I have done virtually over the last couple of years, but I realize I really like to be hands-on. That's just kind of my personality. But learninghowtoheal.com is my website, or drcorinneweaver.com. And I do have a couple books on Amazon called Learning How to Breathe and No More Meds.
Okay.
Cool. Well, Corinne, it's been wonderful to talk with you.
Yes, it's been a pleasure.
Well, thank you so much for having me on your show.
You're welcome. Thanks for being here. That's our podcast for today. We hope you have enjoyed it. You can find out more about Dr. Weaver in the notes. We would love to hear from you, and make sure to leave us a comment. If you like what you heard today, you can learn about our parent coaching program or join us at our next workshop at focusedhealthyfamily.com. Follow us on Facebook at Focused Healthy Family, on Instagram at Gina at Focused Healthy Family. And remember, how you speak to your children shapes their future.